Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Welcome to the 2021 Horizons Economic Forecast. I am Eli Taylor, Vice President of Private Banking and current board member of the Tacoma-Pierce Chamber. Thank you, Tom Pearson and the Chamber, for inviting me to be your MC this morning. 2020 was an unprecedented year in the world, country, and the South Sound. It is more important now than ever that you have access to the information that will help you move your business and lives forward in what looks to be another unprecedented year in 2021. The Chamber is committed to advocating for our business community and providing you with the most up-to-date information and resources on everything from pandemic relief packages, best practices for improving diversity and inclusion, to safe reopening protocols, to shop local opportunities. Today, our focus is on providing you with the economic information and predictions from both the private and public sectors, necessary for you to make informed business decisions for success in the coming year. We believe that our best chances for success stem from a business community committed to diversity and inclusion. And that is what makes our mission to make the South Sound the most equitable and inclusive place to do business in Washington State. Before we begin today, I want to provide some direction on our virtual platform. Our program today is taking place through the online platform called SwapCard. To maximize your experience, take a moment to update your profile and send messages to attendees. This networking function creates the opportunity to go beyond our session today and connect and share information. I encourage you to visit all the exhibitor booths for access to valuable resources and giveaways. You have access to SwapCard for the entire day, so please take advantage. At this time, I would like to recognize our major sponsors who made today's event possible. Title sponsor, Port of Tacoma. Speaker sponsor, Boeing and KeyBank. PCEI report sponsor, Tacoma Public Utilities. In addition to these key sponsors, please join me in thanks for the sponsors shown on your screen. It is because of the generous support of all these businesses that we can bring this year's Horizons Economic Forecast and the Pierce County Economic Index report to you. We appreciate your continued support of the Chamber and the work we do. Thank you. KeyBank is proud to return as a sponsor of the Horizons Economic Forecast event. At KeyBank, I have the privilege of working with the South Sound community. I am proud to say that I work alongside some of the most amazing people every day. Their dedication to serving clients and communities are inspiring. They did not pay me to say that. I really do mean it. We have a strong team mentality at KeyBank, and it is clear that all of us in the room feel the same. As a business community, we are making a difference daily. For that, we should be proud. We are one South Sound, and the Tacoma Chamber of Commerce makes it easier for us to do that. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Pierce County Executive Bruce Danmeyer. As a Pierce County native, Executive Dan Meyer attended Curtis High School before going on to graduate with a distinction from the U.S. Naval Academy and served 8 years as a Civil Engineer Corps officer. While on active duty, he was deployed on humanitarian relief missions in the United States and across the world. At the conclusion of his military service, he returned to Washington State and became a dedicated community volunteer. Bruce and Lauren, his wife of more than 35 years, live in Puyallup. They have 3 grown sons.
Good morning, and thank you, Eli, for that introduction. It is my privilege to join you at the Horizon Economic Forecast Breakfast. Although, candidly, I wish we were in the Greater Tacoma Convention Center all in one room, seeing the strength that is our community. But for today, we'll have to suffice to do it virtually. So taking a quick look back at 2020 in Pierce County, we know that was a challenge for everybody in our community, everybody in our nation, everybody in our state. But I think we came through it strongly. But I want to start looking primarily going forward, and that is job one right now is rolling out the vaccine. We need everybody who can get vaccinated as quickly as possible. It's been a rough rollout at the federal level, a little few challenges at the state level. We got to get needles in arms, people. This is job one. It is our key to getting back to the most normal society we possibly can. In the meantime, Pierce County will be continuing to do our mobile testing. We're doing all of that stuff. I'm really proud of the 90,000 people that have gone through our mobile testing already. So one of the bills that we still have to pay, sadly, is in mental health. This pandemic has been really hard on our children, all of our parents, and all of us. It has been a very difficult thing, and some of those consequences from a mental health perspective are just now becoming apparent. That's why I'm proud that Pierce County is about to open a new crisis recovery center. I'm also proud that we recently approved a 0.1% tax to support behavioral health needs in Pierce County. That's going to be going towards crisis response, early intervention, and prevention. So we'll do that, something we need desperately right now in our community. But as I look forward to Pierce County's 2021 and beyond, I think we are well positioned. We all know that we lost a lot of jobs in 2020, and we got to bring them back in 2021 and add to them. I'm really excited by the growth and the way that Pierce County is attracting new businesses into our community. Really excited about the work that Amazon has done in their new distribution centers they're bringing in, and I hope we'll have some other good news there as well. Excited to have Tesla, excited to have a whole bunch of other new businesses choosing to make Pierce County their home. They see what we already know, that this is a great place to do business and that we have a great workforce ahead of us. At the same time, I would say that one of our biggest challenges is a backcut of that same thing. We've got a great construction industry for commercial. It's a hot market to build commercial space, but it's also a very hot housing market. When Spanaway is the hottest housing market in America, that's a big challenge for us in Pierce County. I recently saw a statistic that said the rents in outlying Pierce County are nearly equivalent with the rents in Seattle's Capitol Hill. So we've got some challenges there. That's why I'm really thankful that I've joined with Mayor Woodards and formerly Councilmember Connie Ladenburg and now Councilmember Ryan Mello to bring together mayors in our community around making strong strides on housing affordability. We need more and more types of housing at all levels. I am really confident that we are going to emerge more strongly from this pandemically induced recession than we went into it. We're strong and well positioned to take advantage of teleworking and technology, of the growth in distribution and manufacturing, take full advantage of our key position in global trade. But I would like to close with a quick thank you to the Chamber and the Economic Development Board. The work that they did to put together those webinars weekly to help our business community through the pandemic have been key. Bringing key people to the table so the businesses could hear the questions and get the most up-to-date information has been really key as we move forward. And will tell you, I'm really proud of our economic development team at Pierce County. Betty Capistani and her team did some amazing things around personal protective equipment distribution, around loans and then grants for helping people with working capital, for adaptation loans and grants to help people get ready and adapt to how they could do business in a COVID world, and in kind of the restaurant rally and in rental assistance. So they've done a lot of great work. I'm really proud of the work Betty and her team have done. But we got more work ahead of us, but we're all geared up for it. Again, I think 2021 is going to be a good year, tough start, getting better every day that goes by, and I'm very excited for it. So with that, thank you very much. And my final comment would be, I want to just say thank you to all the elected leaders in Pierce County right now, all the mayors, all the city council folks and the county council folks who've stepped up to elected leadership in this particularly challenging time. I appreciate their work. I appreciate their partnership as we move Pierce County forward. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure to welcome our title sponsor, the Port of Tacoma. The port is a major player of our economy and has been an important part of our community and history. With first-hand knowledge of the impact the port has on our economy, please welcome the Port of Tacoma Commissioner Richard Marzano and Executive Director Eric Johnson.
Thank you, Eli. As Pierce County's gateway to the global economy, the port is deeply invested in the economic health and vitality of our community. We successfully leverage private and public capital to build infrastructure to not only sustain international trade and manufacturing, but to grow jobs and strengthen our local tax base. Examples would include the $300 million modernization of the Husky Container Terminal on the Port of Tacoma. It was a project that was done by both the Port of Tacoma and Seattle working together in the Northwest Seaport Alliance. The development of the Taylor Auto Processing Facility, which welcomed Volvo as a new customer last year. Industrial leases on the Tacoma Tide Flats and the movement of marine cargo managed by the Alliance through our facilities generated over $3 billion in economic vitality and support over 29,000 jobs just here in Pierce County. This economic activity also means tax revenue. Revenue to support our schools, our libraries, and our social service programs. Economic activity at the port generates an estimated $223 million in state and local revenue every year. 2020 was a difficult year, as we all know, but it reinforced the resilience of the port. Even with people staying at home, working at home, freight continues to move, delivering essential goods and emergency supplies to our port and ultimately to our front porches by FedEx, UPS, and Amazon. While we've seen a small handful of infections on the waterfront, the safety protocols put in place by our customers and our labor partners have prevented a spread of the virus, and none of our terminals have turned into a hot spot. And that goes with the help of the ILWU and our labor partners and the work that they have done. This has included the adoption of the first mitigation bank in the Puyallup River watershed and only the second in Washington State. Because the port plays such a central role to the local economy, we are thrilled to be a sponsor of today's Horizon Economic Forecast event. We look forward to not only what the new year holds for economic development, but also a new strategic plan the port will be adopting this spring. I'd like to introduce the port's Executive Director, Eric Johnson, who will say a few words about that effort.
Thanks, Commissioner. It's good to quote unquote see you all again. I wish I was in person seeing you all like we were last year, but of course we can't do that right now. But as Dick mentioned, I'm Eric Johnson, the Executive Director of the Port of Tacoma. I've been in that job now for about 1.5 years. And last year, our commission launched a new strategic plan for the Port of Tacoma. The old plan is about 8 years old and it needs to be refreshed. And so we set ourselves to that task just about exactly 1 year ago. And despite the challenges of 2020, which have been substantial, we have done a pretty good job of stepping up and providing input into the plan. As you would expect, we started out 1 year ago with planning workshops, open houses, community events, all that kind of thing. And we very quickly realized that that was not going to work in 2020. So we had to pivot into a virtual format, as everybody did. We used a virtual open house, which is a portal into our port. That open house is still open. It's almost closed. I encourage you all to join into that if you can. portoftacoma.com/strategic plan. And one of the things that maybe shouldn't be a surprise, but was a pleasant surprise, is that we probably ended up with 5 to 10 times more community engagement last year than we did 8 years ago when we did our strategic plan. So the virtual format actually led to more interaction as opposed to less, which is a good thing. So the plan is still draft. The commission has not approved its final form yet. We're still taking input, but we've settled on 5 foundational goals. The first one is economic vitality. That should not be a surprise. The port is about economic job creation. We're going to continue to foster the jobs that we have and work to create more. Our second foundational goal is environmental stewardship. The port has a very strong environmental record, as many of you know. Focuses on cleaning up contaminated property that's historically been contaminated, also creating new habitat for salmon and for other wildlife. Our third foundational goal relates to organizational success. How does the port thrive in the new environment? Transportation and infrastructure advocacy. We need to be a leader in thinking about transportation planning and infrastructure, not only in the tide flats, but in the area of the region that supports it. And last but not least, community connections. How do we talk to you all in all of your different forms as you interact with the port? So those are our 5 foundational goals. There are a lot of details. I'd encourage you to weigh in to our open house, comment continually. The plan will be out in a complete form draft in March. We'll be accepting public comments after that. In the meantime, Commissioner Marzano and I are both looking forward to hearing the other presenters and their forecasts for the new year. Thank you all again for allowing the Port of Tacoma to sponsor today's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marzano and Executive Director Eric Johnson, for keeping the Port of Tacoma working hard as a thriving part of our economy. Speaking of our economy, it is a Horizons tradition to have an update from our local Congress members who would normally present to us in person. However, they have been called to Washington, D.C. this morning, and we will be providing us an update via the big screen. That being said, we will now hear from Representative of Washington's 10th Congressional District, Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland. Congresswoman Strickland is the first African American to represent Washington State in Congress, but she also is one of the first Korean American women to serve in the House in its 231-year history, joining the most diverse class of the 117th Congress with a record-setting number of women. Let's hear from newly elected Representative Marilyn Strickland.
I'm Marilyn Strickland, Congresswoman representing the 10th District of Washington State, and it's my honor to be here with you today for the Tacoma-Pierce County Chamber of Commerce Economic Horizons Breakfast. As we look at 2021, we know that 2020 was a rough year, but there is room for optimism. As I look at the Biden administration and what they plan to do, I know that they will continue to support small businesses and the entire employer community. We need to make sure that the PPP loans do not end up being a tax burden, and we're going to be very diligent about making sure that people are not left hanging on tax day. In addition to that, we know that there is cause for optimism because we plan to invest in infrastructure. I'm proud to let you know that I am a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and we will work on many things, including roads, bridges, mass transit, but also expanding the definition of infrastructure to include broadband for communities that are underserved, as well as looking at affordable housing. As we look to 2021, we know that the challenges that we faced were here before COVID. At the same time, we know that we must work on this pandemic. And we're happy to let you know that more vaccines are available, but we want to make sure that people have access to them. So if you have access, please be sure to become vaccinated. And then finally, I'll say this. As we look at leadership and what it means in the 21st century, we know that society works best, business works best when our economy is inclusive and equitable. I applaud the Tacoma-Pierce County Chamber of Commerce for adopting equity inclusion as part of their mission statement. It's good for all of us, but most importantly, it's also good for business. So cheers to 2021. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. And as always, it is my honor to represent and serve you.
We thank Representative Strickland for taking time to update us by video today. It is now my pleasure to welcome another key member of our local community and economy, our speaker sponsor today, Boeing. I am pleased to welcome Vice President of Government Operations for Boeing Commercial Airplanes, Bill McSherry.
Thank you, Eli. Good morning, everyone, and happy 2021. I hope this proves to be a good year for all of us, and certainly one that improves upon what we all experienced last year. Boeing is honored once again to participate in the Horizons economic forecast. There's no question that 2020 was a challenging year. However, despite those difficulties, we at Boeing remain very proud of our role as a significant economic engine throughout the Puget Sound region. That is particularly true here in Pierce County, where we have facilities in Frederickson and of course Auburn just over the county line. More Boeing employees live and work in Washington State than anywhere else in the world. Our workplaces and suppliers stretch from one side of the state to the other, but in Pierce County alone last year, we spent approximately $350 million with more than 110 suppliers and vendors. These are significant numbers, particularly during such a challenging year. As I'm sure you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has significantly affected air travel and the commercial aviation industry, including Boeing. Passenger traffic, particularly international travel, continues to be significantly below 2019 levels. That lower demand and the subsequent decline in aircraft orders and deliveries has led Boeing to take comprehensive action across the company to adapt to our new market reality and transform to be leaner and more sustainable in the future. It has forced us to take some very difficult steps and reduce production in several commercial programs. That, in turn, led to the decision, after careful study, to consolidate 787 final assembly in South Carolina. We believe it will likely be several years before the aerospace industry returns to 2019 levels. However, there is hope as we begin 2021. Demand for Boeing freighters remains strong, and they are playing a critical role in the transportation of goods across the globe, including the safe transport of COVID-19 vaccines. There continues to be demand for the defense products we make, including the KC-46 tanker and the P-8 Poseidon, which are manufactured and delivered here in Puget Sound. And late last year, the FAA announced the Renton-built 737 MAX could return to the skies in the U.S. with software enhancement, pilot training, and other changes to ensure safety. Several of our valued customers, including our longtime hometown partner, Alaska Airlines, have expressed confidence in the airplane with major new orders. I'm deeply proud to work for a company that keeps the world connected through good times and bad, and that has the foundational goal of putting safety, quality, and integrity first in everything we do. As with so many industries, our ability to compete requires us to operate in sophisticated and informed communities, which is why events like this morning's are so important. We are so pleased that members of the community make a point of attending gatherings like this, whether virtually or hopefully soon in person once again, to gain business intelligence and better understand the unique global trends that affect all of us. To that end, I am now pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Rick Wade, who works in close collaboration with Boeing and other corporations and is a great leader. Rick is Senior Vice President of Strategic Alliances and Outreach at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. In that role, he develops and implements programs and initiatives to help the Chamber create new business relationships and partnerships across diverse audiences. He also provides counsel on policy issues and leads special projects. Rick's wealth of knowledge and experience in both the public and private sectors enable him to give a megaphone to the voice of business across the country and share the positive impacts of the free enterprise system. Rick, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me to participate in this very important event sponsored by the Tacoma-Pierce Chamber of Commerce. I'm Rick Wade, Senior Vice President at the United States Chamber of Commerce for Strategic Alliances and Outreach. You know, I was just thinking the other day that every 4 years, we have this really interesting moment in time where we celebrate the life and contributions of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And we also witness the inauguration of the President of the United States of America. And just thinking about Dr. King and his dream, the reality is that some 57 years ago, 250 Americans convened right here in Washington, D.C., in our nation's capital, for Dr. King's historic March on Washington, which is punctuated by Reverend King's I Have a Dream speech. But, you know, often overlooked a half century later is that the full name of the gathering was actually the March on Washington for Jobs and for Freedom, with a very heavy focus on closing the stark gap that existed in America around employment, prosperity, and economic opportunity between white and Black Americans. So more than a half century later, while we've made some progress and progress we've made, that stark gap remains, and we have still a lot of work to be done. And the work to close these gaps remain as important now and as urgent now as ever before. Here's the deal. Still today, the opportunity to obtain an education, to secure a job, to start a business, or simply provide for your family is often determined by the color of your skin. For decades, Black unemployment rates have been consistently twice as high as white unemployment rates. Black students are twice as likely to attend high poverty schools than their white peers. And Black business owners still struggle today to access capital for their business ventures. And then additionally, consider this. Black Americans are more likely than whites to be arrested, to be convicted, than to be sentenced, making it even more difficult and sometimes impossible to re-enter the job market and build a new and a better life. One of our partners here at the U.S. Chamber, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, stated appropriately in its report, The Business Case for Racial Equity. They reminded us, and I quote, that the persistent racial disparities that we see today did not happen by accident, but they arose from a long history of deliberate policies based on race and have been perpetuated by biases that remain systemic inequalities, hurt our individuals, hurt communities, hurt our economy, and hurt our society. And if we are going to address these racial inequality gaps in America, we all benefit, particularly as a society. So addressing inequality, or what we call equality of opportunity at the U.S. Chamber, is not just a moral imperative, it's the right thing to do, but there's the business case, the economic case. Kellogg incidentally reports that if we close the inequality gaps in America, that our economy grows by some $8 trillion. So at the United States Chamber of Commerce, and we are grateful that you're joining us in this movement, we convened back in June of last year. Some thousands of business leaders and business owners and over 500 state and local chambers came together. And we all came together to have a conversation about inequality in America. And we listened and we learned. And based on data, we have now launched perhaps the most impactful historic business-driven initiative in America's history, called the Equality of Opportunity Agenda. And it's very deliberate, very targeted, where we're looking to advance not just private sector solutions to addressing inequality, but policy solutions, not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level around several domains: education, criminal justice, health, unemployment, entrepreneurship, and even wealth, because we understand the tremendous gaps that exist between Black Americans and white Americans with regards to wealth in America. These are very important systemic inequalities that we must exist and work together as a business community to solve. And it's about all of us winning. It's about our communities, our chambers. It's about society, all of us winning when we seek to address equality of opportunity. COVID-19 pandemic and the corresponding economic crisis has thrust these issues even more into the national spotlight. And the country is, I believe, at a major turning point. And it is time for policymakers and business leaders and chambers of commerce and other organizations and people of goodwill to capitalize on this momentum and turn the conversation into real action, and to ensure that the enduring inequalities that have often been rooted in racial bias, that inequality remains a thing of the past. So we look forward to continuing our work at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to advance policies. Tom Donahue and Suzanne Clark, the president of the chamber, during our State of American Business, we made front and center our 2021 business agenda. Will include advancing equality of opportunity. We've already endorsed over 14 pieces of legislation. We're doing more, and we look forward to working with state and local chambers to enact the same type of an agenda on the local level. We believe that this is a defining moment in America, and our goal, again, must be to take that moment and make it a movement, to take this conversation and make it real action, so that we can improve not just our communities, but our society in general. I look forward to working with the Tacoma-Pierce Chamber of Commerce as we all share the same purpose, the same understanding to address and provide equality of opportunity so that every American can have a fair shot at making that dream that Dr. King lived for and died for a reality. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, thank you for that insightful update, Rick. To provide further insight on our nation, I invite you to watch our United States Representative of Washington's 6th Congressional District, Derek Kilmer, in his update. With over a decade of experience working in economic development in the Puget Sound region, Representative Kilmer is focused on getting our economy and our Congress back to work. Please join me in watching Representative Kilmer's congressional update.
Good morning, everybody. Derek Kilmer here. I want to start with a thank you. Thank you to the Chamber for the opportunity to join you today. Thank you to Tom and the whole team for the leadership you have shown during this pandemic and before this pandemic. And thanks again for giving me 35 minutes for this video. Sorry, I made that mistake last year too. Thank you for giving me 3 to 5 minutes for this video. I want to say thanks to the economists that are providing the forecast today. You know, when I was in college, there was a sign up in the econ department that said there are 3 kinds of economists, those that can count and those that can't. I am confident that today's speakers are economists that can count and that have better economics jokes than I have. To the Chamber members, I want to say thank you. Thank you for growing jobs in our region. Thank you for your resilience. Thanks for all you do to create economic opportunity for people. You know, as a guy who spent a decade working professionally in economic development in Pierce County, my priority is supporting your ability to grow jobs. Not to be Captain Obvious here, but this has been a really challenging year. The COVID pandemic has disrupted our lives and cost far too many Americans their lives in a way that's really unimaginable. And I know folks are still hurting and that we have a long way to go toward recovery, but I'm confident we will get there. And we actually saw a start. I've had a sense of urgency about this. Last month, Congress finally passed another relief package. Listen, it's not perfect. I haven't seen much come out of DC that I'd call perfect, but it represents progress. It includes a new round of direct cash payments and extended unemployment benefits, rental assistance for families struggling to stay in their homes, and food assistance. Importantly, it includes help to small businesses. Listen, small businesses are not only the backbone of our economy, they are our star running backs. They're the ones, when we're trying to make it out of a recession, that are racking up the tough yards and scoring the touchdowns and growing the jobs. Now, unfortunately, during this pandemic, our small businesses are too often getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage. In my view, the federal government needs to do some blocking and call some plays for them. So, with that in mind, the new relief law included another round of Paycheck Protection Program loans and made some modifications to make the process for loan forgiveness simpler. It also extended and improved the employee retention tax credit to help keep workers in their jobs, as well as a tax credit to support employers offering paid sick leave. Listen, I know that the best relief we can provide small businesses is getting our economy back open fully, and that's why this new law provides funding for production and distribution of vaccines so we can get those vaccines to as many Americans as possible as quickly as possible. There's funding for other things too, education and childcare, broadband, and other priorities that I don't have time to cover because Tom told me not to talk for 35 minutes this year. Overall, though, this bill is a down payment on meeting the needs, and I expect you're going to see further COVID relief in the next few months. I'm enthusiastic about what the new administration's put on the table, ramping up vaccine distribution so we can beat back this virus once and for all, funds to get schools reopened, helping families that are struggling, helping our local communities that are on the front lines combating this virus. So please know I'm going to keep working to make sure that the federal government steps up to have the backs of folks in our neck of the woods. Let me talk a little bit more about what lies ahead. I think you're going to see some quick and hopefully comprehensive action around infrastructure, since over the years, infrastructure is one of those issues where Democrats and Republicans can come together, investing in everything from roads and bridges to transit, clean energy, broadband, water infrastructure. That can put people to work now and lay the foundation for economic growth over the long haul. I'm also working on some legislation with an economist, who can count, targeting communities that have faced persistent poverty. Even before the COVID crisis, too many communities across the country have just been left behind. So to address that, I'll be introducing a bill to create a new program called Build Back Better Grants to provide long-term, flexible assistance to communities so that they can have targeted, localized policies to create jobs, funding anything from infrastructure to workforce training, small business counseling, or other priorities. Finally, the other big thing I'll be working on, quite simply, is just trying to fix our broken politics, because our capacity to make progress on any of these challenges is hamstrung by dysfunction in DC. Sadly, in many respects, Congress has earned its low poll numbers, rating recently as less popular than head lice, colonoscopies, and the rock band Nickelback. Over the past 2 years, I've served as chairman of a committee called the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress. It's been nicknamed the Fix Congress Committee. It's a committee that's passed nearly 100 bipartisan recommendations just to get Congress to function better on behalf of the American people. Recommendations for things like increasing transparency and improving civility and reforming the budget process to try to stop government shutdowns. So why do I tell you this? Well, one, the committee has been extended for another 2 years. Two, I want you to know that I am committed to getting Congress back on track and working for you. And three, I'm really hoping you'll pray for me. So, speaking of prayer, let me wrap up with this. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote that there is a difference between optimism and hope. Optimism, he wrote, is a passive virtue. It's the belief that things will get better. In contrast, he wrote, hope is an active virtue. It is the belief that together we can make things better. The work that so many of you are doing to make things better in Pierce County gives hope. I've heard some amazing stories of folks in our community just stepping up, local businesses creating personal protective equipment, taking extraordinary steps to help workers stay on the payroll, supporting local food banks. It gives me hope. Here in Pierce County, we know the value of collaboration and partnership. That gives me hope. We have world-class institutions of higher education, innovative businesses in every sector, an outstanding port, great local leaders, a passionate community of residents that love where they live. That gives me hope too. So together, I know we can continue charting a bright economic future for Pierce County, that our horizons are bright. So thanks again for having me. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Our next speaker, Governor Christine Gregoire, is the CEO of Challenge Seattle, an organization comprised of 17 major international companies and nonprofits located in the Seattle region. Challenge Seattle has provided leadership to ensure that Greater Seattle is one of the most innovative and globally competitive regions in the world. Previously, Gregoire served for 2 terms as governor of the state of Washington with a $32 billion biennial budget and over 60,000 employees. Challenge Seattle, along with Seattle Roundtable, have created a coalition, Washington Employers for Racial Equity. Washington Employers for Racial Equity unites corporate leaders from across the state, representing a cross-sector coalition of companies, large and small, local and global. Challenge Seattle and Washington Roundtable are joined by a growing list of regional and statewide business associations, including the Tacoma-Pierce County Chamber of Commerce, representing employers committed to the pursuit of equity for all Washingtonians. Thank you, Governor Gregoire, for your commitment to our state, our region, and our business community. Your focus on innovation and equity is helping make our region a leader in innumerable ways.
Hi, this is Chris Gregoire, CEO of Challenge Seattle. Thanks, Tom, for inviting me today. Challenge Seattle is comprised of 21 members, 3 nonprofits and 18 for-profits like Starbucks and Boeing and Microsoft. We came together really to give back to the community at large. For example, last spring in helping city, county, and state be able to acquire the kind of PPE they were going to need for first responders and healthcare workers. This past June, we took a look at the fact that we had had the tragic death of George Floyd, and we also saw all the demonstrations, and we asked ourselves as CEOs, is there something we should be doing that we can be doing? So we began a journey of listening and learning. We worked with Boston Consulting Group, who produced a 130-page report looking at all of the experience of a Black Washingtonian born in Washington State, all the various areas like healthcare and workplace, as well as criminal justice and others. And out of that came a stark reality that we have a significant problem in our state, and COVID obviously has made that even more dramatic. So we wanted to do some training. We engaged with the Racial Equity Institute out of North Carolina, saw that the problem is not unique to Washington State, began the work of drafting up a commitment about what we as employers can do to make equity in the workplace real. how we can advance public policy that can make racial equity good for children in school as well as healthcare, for example. How we can have businesses that are Black owned really be able to grow and compete and survive and thrive. And out of that, we also said we want to have transparency because we want to show whether we're succeeding or failing, because if we're failing, we need to take a course correction. We produced a 14-page report to share with folks like you what we learned in brief about how bad the problem is and how the typical response is, well, it's all because of education level or it's all because of finance level. Those reasons don't work. We have a deep and resounding problem in our state we want to step up to. So we created Washington Employers for Racial Equity. You can go on the website and see the report and the commitment and the coalition comprised of about 12 now sponsors. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tacoma-Pierce County Chamber. You were among the first to join. And over almost about 70 employers thus far, and we invite the rest of you to join us as well. This is a problem that it will take all of us working together to solve. And so we want to join as an employer group to do what we can to ensure that everybody knows that the welcome mat is out. We have a diverse workforce. We have absolute equity. And when we do, we will actually be more prosperous. We will actually be more successful, not only as companies, but as a state. And that's where we want you to join us and be a part of WERE. WERE. We're ready to go to work. We're ready to succeed. We're ready to have racial equity in the great state of Washington. Thanks all.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Neil Johnson of Sound Resource Economics and Tom Layson of KBTC, who will present the Pierce County Economic Index report. The Pierce County Economic Index, sponsored by Tacoma Public Utilities, is presented to the Pierce County community as a measure of the economic well-being of our community. It is my great pleasure to introduce two professionals with exceptional expertise in their respective fields, research and communications. Dr. Neil Johnson is the owner and principal of Sound Resource Economics here in Tacoma. His background is in natural resource economics. Dr. Johnson has compiled this work over the course of many months and looks forward to sharing it with all of you. Tom Layson is KBTC's managing editor and the producer-host of Northwest Now. Tom comes to the job with more than 30 years of experience, having worked as a television news reporter and anchor. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Neil Johnson and Mr. Tom Layson to present the Executive Summary 2021 PCEI report.
Good morning, I'm Tom Layson, the producer-host of Northwest Now on KBTC Public Television. Happy to be here for another Horizons Breakfast and to share a brief summary of the Pierce County Economic Index, or PCEI. The Pierce County Economic Index provides a means of gauging the health of the Pierce County economy. Dr. Neil Johnson provides economic and statistic consulting services through his consulting practice, Sound Resource Economics, based in Tacoma. Dr. Johnson received his doctorate in economics from University of Washington and his master's degree in agricultural and resource economics with a minor in statistics from Oregon State University. And those statistics are going to be one of the things we're going to be leaning on in this presentation. Dr. Johnson, let's start with the Pierce County Economic Index, the PCEI, and I'm going to let you break what to me was some very surprising news.
Yeah, so surprise, you dump a bunch of money into the economy via relief payments, and the PCEI is forecast to be up about 5.2% in 2020, and that comes from the CARES Act, extended unemployment benefits and those $1,200 checks.
So it really does point to the power and the impact that kind of injection into the economy can have. As an outsider, you hear about it here and there, but to really see it come together like that is pretty amazing. What is the projection for next year, particularly since we're talking about another big package?
Yeah, so we've got the package that they put in at the end of 2020, and then they most likely have one going forward. So I've assumed that the Biden administration is going to do another $1,400 to those that qualify, along with the extended unemployment benefits, the federal boost to unemployment benefits, and that paycheck protection program. A lot of that counts as income. So looking forward, we're looking at probably about 1.9% increase in 2021, but that's relative to a relatively strong 2020. End of year 2020 to end of year 2021, we're looking at maybe 0.5% gain. And that just has to do with that those payments sort of peter out towards the end of the year, at least in my assumption.
You mentioned the I word, income, personal income, always important piece of this calculation, and in a discussion about how people are doing. How did people do?
Well, so yeah, so total personal income, real total personal income was up 4.6%. And again, this captures, those stimulus payments and a good portion of the Paycheck Protection Program loans, which are can be forgivable. Those will count as income if they are forgiven. On a per capita basis, income is up, or is forecast to be up maybe up to about $56,800. So that's about a 4.6% increase there. Going forward, 2021, we're looking at maybe a 2.5% increase. Again, that's based on these, continuing payments.
One thing I do think we should discuss too is that, there's been this ongoing discussion about kind of a tale of two cities. Income statistically looks good, but the statistics don't mean anything if you're not a knowledge worker, somebody able to work remote. There's not much demand for your product. So there can be at least two stories to this whole picture, I assume too, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you were in the leisure and hospitality business, that was bad. If you were in, say, professional and business services or finance, things look pretty good there. And then it also depends upon whether, if you're in one of those impacted industries, did you lose your job? Did you get your hours cut? So there's a lot of households that, they received $1,200 checks per person, and they didn't lose any income. They actually added income. And there's other households that are, significantly worse off than, say, 2019.
This rolls obviously your income right into taxable retail sales. So much progress was being made, especially in Pierce County prior to COVID. What happened in 2020?
Oh, well, second quarter was a disaster for some areas. So if you look at fiscal year to fiscal year, so middle of 2019 to middle of 2020, retail sales were up about 1.3%. That's pretty anemic. That's in inflation-adjusted dollars. The vast majority of that is due to an abysmal second quarter. You saw different sectors going, just plummeting. You had, for example, new and used auto dealers. They were off about 80 million, 75 million, 80 million. Some sectors were up. Miscellaneous retailers sort of, offset that by being up about 80%. The construction sector, that was off about 147 million just in that quarter. So it's sort of a mixed bag in terms of what you actually saw there. Some sectors, again, up fairly good, other sectors down sharply.
One of the interesting things about doing this remote is I scrolled through a piece of my notes a little prematurely. I want to just cue you here that I'm going to jump back for a minute on employment and jobs. Just happened to pop over that paragraph there in the PCEI summary. Some wild swings when it comes to the unemployment numbers this year. Talk a little bit about that, where we landed and where maybe you think we're going with jobs.
Yeah, so again, that second quarter, particularly April, going from March to April, within Pierce County, so jobs within Pierce County, we lost 50,000. The number of Pierce County workers that lost their jobs, about 63,000. That's just in 1 month, okay? Then we bounced back. So, the federal government came out with this Paycheck Protection Program, and I think that partially offset stuff. Some of the business restrictions were relaxed. That certainly helped. And I think also businesses sort of figured out how to work with, the COVID pandemic. And so they were able to sort of get back to work. And so you fast forward to, say, August, even to the end of the year, we're down maybe 10,000 jobs within Pierce County. And in terms of the number of unemployed, we're up maybe 19,000 relative to pre-pandemic levels. So not too bad, but again, it's going to depend on which sector you're in.
Yeah, and you were saying hospitality obviously really took a beating. This is a conversation that we had after coming out of the Great Recession, which is some of those jobs, you could tell there were secular changes in the economy occurring prior to that Great Recession. And with the Great Recession, you could see some of those jobs were not going to come back because of the nature of them. Could we say the same thing? I'm going to crystal ball you here a little bit. Saying maybe the same thing about some of the jobs we're seeing this time. There were some secular changes. The pandemic hits. Some of those jobs aren't coming back.
Yeah, I don't know if we can say that this time. I mean, we're down about 5,000 on leisure and hospitality. Those will probably come back. There's probably a pent-up demand for that type of stuff. It's just a matter of how damaged were businesses. So that'll come back. Another sector that was down is construction, but that was already forecast to be down over 2020 and 2021, just based upon building permits. Latest data on building permits for them, that's going to go back up. Okay, so overall, for maybe beginning of 2020 to beginning of 2022, that's probably going to be relatively flat. So, yeah. But it is going to put us back. I'm looking for us to be sort of where we were pre-pandemic, maybe first quarter, second quarter of 2022.
Our last 90 seconds here, talking a little bit about the ports of Tacoma and Seattle and the Northwest Seaport Alliance. I know that's an important data point for the PCEI. Last year, we were talking about a trade war with China really having an impact on the port. What's the hope for 2021 with the Biden administration, maybe changes in our relationship with China? What are you thinking about that? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of traffic actually shifted back into 2019. Due to the booming tariffs. And so relative to that, 2020 was down about 12.8%. That's my forecast. And that has to do with both that shift in traffic back to 2019 to avoid tariffs, the pandemic. And then there's a third component, which I'm not sure what's going on, because if you look at all other West Coast ports combined, they're flat, but Tacoma's down. So I'm not sure what's going on there. If that has to do with the mix of perhaps we're a little bit more China-centric or concentrated on China relative to, say, the Southern California ports. So, but going forward, it should bounce back, and probably more than the port's own forecasts indicate.
Yeah, and a lot of that obviously is going to depend on demand, which of course in turn depends on the rollout of the vaccine and how successful and how timely that is. So there's a lot to keep your fingers crossed about going into 2021. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. The full report will be made available, of course, to all of our attendees. On behalf of KBTC Public Television, I'm Tom Layson. KBTC is proud to be part of this program every year. And now let's meet our panelists for this discussion. Bill Robertson is the president and CEO of MultiCare Health Systems. Bill joined MultiCare in 2014. Anthony Antone is the president and CEO of Washington State Hospitality, which provides members with programs, services, and information to succeed in the hospitality industry. And Dan Absher is the CEO of Absher Construction and has served in that role since 1990. Welcome all of you to this event this year. It's always great to have a discussion with thought and business leaders here in the Pierce County area. I'm going to start with a deliberately vague question. And this is a piece of clay that I want you to be able to shape the way you would. Let's start with a discussion of how 2020 treated each of you in your respective industries. Bill, we'll start with MultiCare. Safe to say, obviously, you've been a little busy, but I think the big questions are about, profitability, continued M&A, and understanding maybe what is changing permanently in your industry because of COVID.
Well, that's a great question that we have been talking about inside our organization and in the industry, because things are a lot different starting 2021 than they were starting 2020. For MultiCare, the economic impact, not necessarily of the pandemic itself, but of society's response to the pandemic have been very significant. We had a negative impact on our operating margin of about $250 million, which is a pretty big number for us, which because of federal and then operational changes we made, we have mitigated a fairly significant piece of that, but still a very difficult year financially for us as an institution. But it's changed patient care in dramatic ways. And we saw dramatic shifts, not just in multi-care, but across industry in terms of virtual care being provided in ways that I don't think any of us could have imagined happened that rapidly. Of course, we're in the midst right now of how we deal with the vaccine, which is a really important part of solving this pandemic situation for us. We have many of our employees who used to work in office buildings and the like, working remotely. Very dramatic changes in how clinical practices happen, which we don't talk a lot about, but clinical practice in terms of how we deal with disease has dramatically shifted over the 10 or 12 months that the disease has been present. So a lot of change, I'd say 10 years worth of change happened in about 10 months for the healthcare industry inside in the state of Washington, but more broadly in the United States. So very dramatic impact, some of which ultimately will be positive, but obviously the human toll of this pandemic has been difficult.
Bill, while I've got you here, everybody will get a chance on this question, but you brought something up that I want to give you a chance to hit. You know, you see on social media, and I realize the credibility of some of those sources, but you know, there is a certain segment out there that says, well, the hospitals are making money hand over fist on this thing. They're collecting all this government money. I think your comments are informative about that. What would you tell people who have the secret notion that somehow this is good for the healthcare industry?
If it's good for the healthcare industry, I don't know anybody in the healthcare industry who has experienced it being positive. It has been very difficult with the reduction in non-COVID care activities, which is where mostly healthcare organizations create the sustainability they need. With that reduction, it was devastating to most organizations that I'm aware of, clearly to multi-care. We've been able to recover some of that activity, but by way of an example, our say ER services at Marybridge Children's Hospital are half their normal volume. That is, and we only get paid when we're taking care of patients. So very dramatic impact on the viability of some healthcare organizations, which has created interesting changes in how people want to connect with each other in terms of, say, opportunities for acquiring other organizations, maybe. So our Capital Medical Center acquisition is in some ways tied to the impact that COVID had.
Anthony, I want to switch over to you. Obviously, the hospitality industry, you don't have to be an economist to hear what's been going on there. So give us the straight scoop on what's going on with your members in 2020.
Well, I thought you were going to say, how did 2020 treat your members? And I was hearkening back to Norm from Cheers when they said, "How's life treating you, Norm?" And he says, "Well, like a baby treats a diaper." It's been a tough year. I don't mean to laugh because people have lost everything. People have lost their businesses, and it becomes so overwhelming. You don't know what to do with it. On average, each one of these closed months, we're down 75 to 80%. And we've been closed for 5-6 months now of the past 12. And there doesn't seem to be an urgency in opening it, or we'll get into 2021 later. But it looks like we're going to be closed for the first half of 2021. And so it's tough. And there's the different sides of our industries are a little bit different. Quick service is different than the full service and hotel industry. But those two sides of the industry and the entertainment side of our industry is devastated. Employment is down. Probably, I haven't seen December numbers yet, but my estimate will be over a couple 100,000 people will be unemployed or not working in the industry year over year. We've, as of October, before these latest closed out, we'd already lost 2,000 businesses permanently. So at some point, it just becomes overwhelming. It's devastating. The urgency to get us back open is frustrating, and people are doing everything creatively they can to survive.
Yeah, well, I think your point is well taken, Anthony. You know, I know you're not laughing at the situation, but you know, you have a choice. You can either laugh or you can cry. And, you know, so I think everybody, you know, we're on board with that. Dan, let's talk about construction. You know, the construction industry and the housing industry and real estate is a $100 bet I would have lost if somebody would have said, hey, how would things go in a global pandemic and people losing their jobs? What's going to happen to construction? It seems when we look at the PCEI data, although it's been difficult to collect, that it's not awful. Give us the straight scoop about what's going on in your industry.
Yeah, it's hard to follow Anthony and complain, honestly. It did have a hit to our industry, no question. For us, we lost about a third of anticipated revenue for 2020. A few projects were anticipated to break ground, and they didn't. All of our projects shut down for at least some time. The frustrating thing is construction was treated a little differently throughout the country. So some states really had no shutdown at all. We had, I'd say, a middle range to long range shutdown, and some states had bigger shutdowns. So it had an impact, but we were able to survive it, and we see all of our projects are back going. Not all of the projects that were postponed have restarted yet, but it's a really good example of how it's affected the community. I'll use one project as an example. We were due to break ground on the Names Family YMCA here in Tacoma last spring. You know, the YMCA, of course, has been shut down for most of the last year, and they've had to postpone the start of that project in spite of a great community outreach, fundraising, the need for the facility. Everything's lined up. That project needs to go, but because of COVID and the consequences of COVID, we may not even be able to break ground this year. We're certainly hoping to, and but the sooner we can turn this around, the sooner they're going to be able to get back to normal. But I think that in a microcosm is a great example of what's happening to our industry and how it's affecting our communities.
Dan, I know you talk to a lot of different builders in different verticals when you chat and you know, meet with people in your industry. Could you just, while I've got you here for a second, compare and contrast a little bit residential and commercial? Are they on the same glide path? Is one up? Is one down? Break that out a little for us.
Yeah, good question. Not only I'll address the impact now, but a little bit what I see for the future. The urban high-rise living has taken a hit. Projects that were ongoing are going to finish, but a lot of those projects have been delayed or postponed. We had a few contracts of that type that are indefinitely delayed. But what I see as an infill is more suburban growth, more middle market growth in construction, which will help residential, and it'll bridge a gap between commercial contractors and residential contractors. There'll be a bit of a hybrid project with 8 plexes and 16 plexes is what I would anticipate will happen in the residential sector. The other thing affecting Pierce County, as you've all seen, housing market's strong in Pierce County, and we will benefit from, I believe, some of the turmoil in King County and Seattle, and more people, my kids, are choosing to live in Pierce County. And I think that's typical of what you'll see. I believe that will counteract kind of a fear of going out and building new projects. The fact that Pierce County is going to grow a little, I believe, particularly residentially. So I think I see kind of what I would call middle from duplexes, quadplexes, 8plexes, and even kind of urban or suburban villages will become popular.
I want to talk now and move into a discussion about 2021 and what you see as being important in 2021. Obviously, a successful rollout of the COVID vaccine is crucial, and There are concerns about that, but let's assume we do get enough shots in arms to start a return to normal. I don't know if that's Q2, Q3, Q4, don't ask me. What is normal now? Bill, you gestured at this a little bit. You've got a lot of people on remote work, but is this the end of smaller businesses or smaller providers if you're in the healthcare vertical? Any of you who are gathering products, do you see a move toward reshoring manufacturing for the products that you acquire? And Dan, I'm thinking of you in this. And what are you keeping an eye on that's crucial in each one of your verticals? I know that's a huge question, but I'm asking you just to project forward a little bit about what's important and what you think maybe how you anticipate 2021 rolling out if things work with the vaccine. Bill, let me start with you.
So Yogi Berra said making predictions is difficult, particularly about the future. And so that's a position you're putting us in. I think that there's some things that are here to stay in the healthcare industry that we implemented in the COVID situation. Virtual care is going to expand dramatically. It's convenient, it's effective, it's efficient for people. More in-community care is going to be in place so that people don't necessarily have to go into a hospital, say, or a hospital ER. So that's all going to be at play. I do think that many of the people who have gone home within infrastructure in healthcare who work on the infrastructure side, call centers and the like, are likely going to stay working out of their homes. We've been very intentional about that in multi-care. I do think that there will be some consolidation in the industry because it's hard to be on your own when the challenges of healthcare or the economy are what they are. So those I think are going to happen. One of the questions that we toy with a lot is what happens if we don't get enough vaccine into arms? Can we as a society sustain this no activity or low activity economy into perpetuity? And I think the answer ultimately is no. And I'm not sure that's a question that you asked, but if you look at history, societies have had to live in spite of disease as opposed to shut down because of disease. And so I think there's some questions we need to wrestle with in that space. I'm not sure I have answers for that, but I do think we need to explore that as well.
Yeah, well, I hope we haven't crossed the Rubicon here where the vaccine rollout, where the unvaccinated are going to have to get COVID before they are vaccinated, based on how the math works out. We'll have to see, but let's keep our fingers crossed that we have a successful program. Anthony, when I think about you, the question about is this the end of small businesses? Is this the end of mom and pop, non-national chain entertainment outlets? Is part A of that question, and part B of that question, and this will go to Dan too after you, is can people who are running businesses get their stuff? I mean, it's been hard to get supplies, to get food products, to get refrigerators, you name it. It's been difficult. So talk about some of those things going into 2021.
So let me. I opened with a lot of downer. Let me give a positive in that October we were seeing a good crawback of the industry. The pent up demand to get out and be part of our community was large, and we were limited by capacity. But we saw almost a profitable October before the governor chose to close us down again. And so when we can open, we know the demand is there. And when you look at generation changes, assuming that COVID hasn't changed them permanently, millennials and whatever we're calling the generation before them, I've heard them called screeners and other things, and they have a higher demand on experiences, which is hospitality. I think when I was growing up, I wanted a baseball glove. I wanted an Atari because I'm really old. I wanted a thing. This generation wants to go outside. They want to go places. They want to do something when they're not on their phone, as you pointed out. And so I do think there will be a bounce back in our industry, and I think that demands variety. I think the bad news is for the existing businesses who've already plunged their life savings into their businesses, I don't know what it means for them if the debt that they've accumulated, and if in fact the governor does keep us closed until June, which is the current way it looks. But as you said, things change so fast. That the existing businesses 2021 is bleak, but I think for the long-term health of the industry and demand, it is positive. On the lodging side, I think it's going to be a little bit longer. If you look towards the lodging side, I think state to state or international travel is on a 2-year delay. I think some in the airlines are predicting closer to 3 to 4. I'm a little more optimistic because I think people do want to live. But that means we're going to have to see our own state for a while to really keep our local communities that depend on tourism going.
Dan, when I think about your industry into 2021, and I talked about reshoring and about making some of our own materials, I have occasion to talk to actually quite a few realtors and builders from time to time. And man, there are a lot of framed up homes that aren't going to have kitchens in them for a while. So what's going on? What are your thoughts going into 2021 about some of those issues about maybe reshoring, material acquisition, supply chain issues? Talk to me about that.
Well, we're focused more on the commercial side, and we really haven't experienced that issue yet. There's some cost escalation in wood products and other products, but we've been able to service our projects pretty well. I'm proud of the construction industry in general. As you might imagine, our industry wasn't thrilled to adopt a bunch of new standards like wearing masks while you're working and all that, and it was tough on them. But we have adapted and found a new way to work. So when I look at 21 and what's important, it's that patience and continued resilience to work in a new way, to have your administrators working remotely. It's a whole new way to work. I think as far as the future of small businesses, I think because of what I said in my last segment, there will be a lot of opportunity for small businesses to do smaller construction projects. And I feel bullish about the opportunities in the construction industry to reshape itself for small businesses to continue to open and operate successfully. I feel the construction industry is a lot like the restaurant industry. It's high risk. A lot of people come in and out of it, but both industries are a great example of the American where you can achieve the American dream. You can go out and learn how to frame a wall and then start your own business. You can go out and learn to cook and set up your own cafe. And I do believe there's going to be demand for that. And I'm excited about that opportunity.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be some pent up demand there. And so it's nice to hear some optimism from you in your industry as well. I want to talk to you all about federal and state government. The impact of stimulus, is it important to you and your verticals or not so much? And also what you're keeping an eye on state government. The Washington State Economic Development Council has identified a couple of priorities: additional funding for economic development, state-driven small business support, and investments in broadband and infrastructure. Do any of those, what are you guys keeping an eye on? What matters at the federal and state level? Bill, let me start with you in healthcare.
We have been fortunate to have some level of support during 2020 from the federal level, which helped fill that nearly $250 million hole, but only a fraction of it. It was just about 25% of the negative impact that we had. So we got about $60 million related to $250 million worth of problem. So it was important to us, but our ability to respond to that from an operating perspective has been a larger part of our ability to be viable as an organization. I think as a healthcare industry, and I think that's the principle going forward. Government plays a really important role in this situation, but ultimately businesses have to figure out how to live in the new reality. Government is not big enough and shouldn't be big enough actually to fill the gap. and it's deficit spending anyway. So there's an overhang that happens. So I think we have to be really careful to think that government spending is the panacea to this, because business really has to figure out how to be viable in whatever the environment that we're working in. And that's our focus, I think, in the industry. Some help is really important. Too much help creates an overhang on the economy that we'll be paying for decades. And I think that's the balance we have to find.
Anthony, some of your people, I'm sure, took PPE and boy, got through the details and the complications associated with that, but they're also watching state government that's in session right now. What are the things as the association that are kind of your priorities that you're saying this has to happen or this shouldn't happen? Give us some insight.
You bet. Yeah, I was thinking about the role of government in my business. I think when my dad and grandfather got into the industry in Pierce County, they got it because they wanted to be their own boss. They didn't want to be dependent on government. They were fiercely independent. And yet here we are in a time where the industry is very dependent on those actions. So Triple P this summer saved a lot of people from going out of business. The numbers would have been far worse. This last round of Triple P, I think, made the improvements we would all hope for, really focus on the businesses that are hurting. And I think this round of Triple P will be helpful. And probably one last round, whether it's the Restaurant Act or anything else coming out of the federal side, could really be helpful because we're forced to be closed. And then the other side of government is get us open. More than a handout, we want to be able to serve ourselves. We'd worked so well with government through October to keep restaurant cases in restaurants less than 0.5% of the cases. We know we can do it effectively. I think really it's going to come down on will the governor open us. On the legislative side, the unemployment bill, the average restaurant's going to receive about an 800% increase in their unemployment insurance. And that bill is up right in the beginning of session. So all of a sudden, if we start recovering, but we can't afford to employ anyone because the UI benefits for things we didn't do to ourselves are so high, I think that's going to be a challenge. And then a lot of our businesses and taxes were based on how we performed in 2019. So we'd love to see those immediately corrected. So again, when we restart, we're able to. So there will be a financial package that will include a different ideas. I'd rather have the industry keep an open mind and have the legislature come together to figure out how to do it than narrow in on one proposal. But ramping back up when we're allowed to be open and getting us open are probably the biggest keys in the first part of the year.
And Dan, same question to you. What are you looking at when it comes to, probably in your case, I don't know if you do much federal projects or not, but state projects, state government, some of the look back features in terms of taxation, how are those relevant in construction?
Yeah, we do federal work. I'll just echo some of the important things Bill and Anthony said, and maybe shift that to what I think, bring it into Pierce County and what's important for Pierce County. And I want to toot Pierce County's horn a little bit. I believe we have a calling card that can attract people. We can show how both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, can work together cooperatively to try to help the community businesses in a positive way. And it's not something we're seeing a lot around the country, but it's something I see in Pierce County every day. And I think that's really important. It makes Pierce County a great place to be. Our county executive is a Republican, our mayor of Tacoma is a Democrat, and last I saw, they weren't at each other's throat. I mean, it's refreshing to see people understand that there's a greater good than partisan politics. So I really appreciate that about Pierce County. The PPP, we were able to avail ourselves of some of that, and we literally kept people employed, kept them on payroll, and while they were at home waiting for us to open back up. Without the PPP, we absolutely could not have done that. So that's a great example of how that helped. Fortunately, we're up and running again. So it's a balance on that, on the stimulus though. You know, if a little bit of stimulus is good, some might argue that unlimited stimulus is good, but obviously there's a line. So I do worry that we take it too far. Let's have enough so people can help themselves and get their businesses back going, but not so much that we corrupt the system and have inflation going out of control in a year or two.
Yeah, I was wondering if somebody was going to bring up the I word there, inflation. Hey, you know, this thing goes quickly. Our last 3 minutes here, I wanted to hit each one of you, and Dan, you brought it to Pierce County, which is great. Every year we talk about workforce, and every year there's a shortage of skilled workers for the amount of jobs available. Is this going to come into balance now a little more, do you think? Or if the SHOT program works and demand creeps up, are we going to be in the same imbalance? I want to hit all three of you fairly quickly on that, starting, Bill, with you. How are you thinking about workforce and getting skilled workers?
Well, workforce is something we think about all the time. And one of the things that's interesting with the virtualization of some aspects of our businesses, we're now able to recruit nationally to have people work remotely or virtually with us. And so that's solving some of our problem, but we still have a growing challenge with access to clinicians. Nurses are a big challenge because of some of the issues with getting nursing licenses in the state of Washington. So it's going to continue to be a challenge, and we're really excited about collaborating with educational institutions in our area, which are great to work with, to build our workforce for the future, working together with the institutions of the community.
Anthony, workforce from your perspective.
You know, I think the industry is literally going to reinvent itself coming out of this pandemic. And so when workers have been out of work for 3 months already and now projected to be out of work until June, a lot of them are going to leave the industry permanently. And so we're going to have to build back differently. We're going to have to build back with different skill sets. And it's a chance to take maybe 100-year-old model and just flat out start over, because there is all of our workers who said we had to do things this way probably aren't coming back or have gone, or if they're really passionate in the industry, move to a state that wants to be open. And so it's going to be interesting to see how we rebuild back. And I think it's going to give us a chance to say, what could it look like differently? And how do we help grow people so they keep moving to 60,000 jobs? And the other thing on Pierce County and Tacoma are so well suited, and Bellevue, to take away Seattle's culinary hub title. I think Seattle has not shown its passion for hospitality over the last year and a half, 2 years. And I think there's this window here for Pierce County to say, why can't we have all the James Beard chefs? Why can't we have the premier restaurants? Why can't we have the culinary hubs and really compete well?
Dan, last 30 seconds, hit us on workforce. You obviously rely on skilled workers as well.
Right, I'll go quick. Prior to COVID, the construction industry was having a huge boom and we were really taxed. So in a backhanded kind of way, COVID slowed that down, and we can catch up with the demand for workforce. I think it will build back up again, but the immediate need's not desperate, but it's a long-term play. And as Bill said, we're now looking at people from across the country who could actually work for us, but work remotely and just come visit job sites occasionally and from a management position. It's a whole new way of looking at things that will help us attract workforce.
All right, everybody, great discussion. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank each of our panelists for participating in the discussion. So a virtual round of applause for Bill Robertson, Anthony Antone, and Dan Absher. Thanks so much. I'm Tom Layson with KBTC Public Television. Thanks for attending this year's event. Now I'll toss it back to our hosts.
Thank you to our panelists today. Your work and dedication are truly great assets to our business community. This year's Pierce County Economic Index can be found at www.pciereport.com. The password to access the data and information will be posted in the chat, and the Chamber will send a follow-up event email with it also to all attendees. As we wrap up, I want to thank all of our sponsors and the Chamber for their dedication to our community, and my employer KeyBank for supporting it all. Thank you to all our sponsors, speakers, and panelists this morning. Port of Tacoma, Boeing, KeyBank, Tacoma Public Utilities. In addition to these key sponsors, please join me in appreciation for the sponsors shown on your screen. The growth of the South Sound is shown through the talent, skills, and leadership that come from those who live here and their successes. This year, businesses and their leaders have shown remarkable resiliency. We look forward to navigating 2021 with you. Thank you for spending your morning with us, and have a great day.